The Toldot Yaakov Yosef Speaks from the Grave. This story concerns a young couple recently married and blissfully in love, when suddenly the bride discovers a mysterious side to her husband that she had never realized before they were married. She noticed that her husband had taken to visiting the mikveh, the special body of water that people use for purification, more often than most men did. She also saw that he had a particular book that he secreted, that he hid in his talis bag, and he would take out and read when other people weren't around. But when people would appear, he would quickly hide the book back in his talis bag. She was very happy with her husband, but these things puzzled her. And so once, when her husband wasn't home, she borrowed the book from his talis bag, and she took it to her father, and she showed it to him. And her father's eyes began to bulge, and his face began to turn red and purple, and was all contorted, and he said, "Oh no, we've fallen in. My daughter has married a member of the cult. What shall we do?" Now you must understand that the cult that he was referring to is what we today call the Hasidic movement. The Hasidic movement, founded by Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, began in the 1700s, and this took place towards the very end of those 1700s. And at the beginning there was great machloket, much dispute in the Jewish people as to whether the early Hasidim were observing Judaism traditionally. And there were great rabbis who criticized them and even excommunicated them, and certainly didn't want their daughters to marry one. Today, that machloket is history, and Hasidim and non-Hasidim marry into each other's families and recognize the good things about each other. Except in those days, it was a burning issue. And this father and father-in-law was so upset when he discovered that his son-in-law was reading a book entitled The Toldot Yaakov Yosef. You see, Yaakov Yosef, the author, was Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polna'a, otherwise known as the Toldot Yaakov Yosef, or his Sefer. He was one of the most famous students of the Baal Shem Tov. And when he saw that his son-in-law was reading that book, he was convinced that he had been grabbed by this cult, the Hasidim, and that he was not a fit husband for this man's daughter. And so he began to beg his daughter to accept a get, a divorce, from her husband. But his daughter said, "I don't want him, I love him." And the son-in-law said, "What are you talking about? We love each other." And the father-in-law said, "You are not supposed to be in that group, and I want you out of my family and out of my house, and I never would have let you marry my daughter in the first place." And it became such a big machloket that people in the town started taking sides. There were those who defended the boy and the girl who were in love, and there were those who said that the Hasidim were not so terrible, but there were many who said, "Those Hasidim are so bad, you must cut your losses, get a quick divorce, and start over again." And it became an issue that was threatening to divide the entire community, until an order came from on high. And when I say on high, I don't mean heaven. I mean from the Poritz. A Poritz was the term given to the local nobleman who used to own entire towns and many miles of land, and used to have the power of judgment over all the people who lived there, many of whom were Jewish. And when the Poritz made a decree, that decree was law. So when the Poritz said, "You'd better show up and talk to me about this," all of the parties involved showed up, and they told him the story. And the old Poritz, he must have been in his late 80s by now, maybe even more. The old Poritz said, Now I realize that the time has come for me to tell you a story from my youth, from my younger years." And so what could this Poritz possibly have to tell us that would bear upon our dilemma? And he said, "Listen to me, because I have realized now that my days are numbered, but that I am here on earth now so that I can tell you this story and restore peace in your family and in my town." For the rest of this story, tune in to the Toldot Yaakov Yosef Speaks from the Grave, Part 2.